Okay, let's get into the conversation for today, ladies and gentlemen, especially if you are working for a company, with a company. I don't know, okay? But if you feel like you've overworked, you've worked beyond your hours, Michaela,
I'm hearing you.
okay? You feel like, boss, you need to be paying me more money here because, bro, I'm supposed to work 40 hours and now I'm working 45, 50 hours a week. But what does the contract say? Does it apply to you? Doesn't it apply to you? Did you even read your contract? Let us just put that out there. Okay?
Or did you browse through it?
You know what I'm saying? And then you pretended. But are you entitled to overtime pay is the question. The question that many people have asked. A question that maybe some have received answers that isn't so lekker. To break it down for us and to help us understand how overtime works, how, who it applies to, what doesn't apply to contractually. What are things looking like? It is our resident attorney, Jenna Adams from Adams and Associates, joins us live in studio right now. And of course, we are live on Facebook as well. And this conversation will be put up onto podcast, just in case you end up missing it here on air and on Facebook. We are going to put it up onto podcast as well. Jenna, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome back, man.
Thank you, and good afternoon to your listeners.
Let's get into this overtime conversation. Okay, firstly, what is overtime? Let's start at the basis of it all. What is overtime?
Sure. So overtime is regulated by Section 10 of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. I'm just going to call it the BCEA. And overtime is defined as any hours that exceeds your ordinary working hours for the day or for the week.
Okay.
It's in excess of your contractual obligation in your hours. Yes.
Okay. And then just in terms of all of that, right? So sometimes we get confused when it comes to the way it gets calculated, because sometimes we get told, oh, it's time plus a half of each day. Because I remember when I worked in call center, they said, oh, overtime is time and a half, and we didn't understand what that meant. How is it calculated? How do companies calculate our overtime?
Sure. So let's just assume that you work ordinary a week of Monday to Friday, for example. Then your Saturday would be calculated at time and a half.
Yeah.
So what that means is it's your hourly rate times 1.5.
Okay.
Or if it was a Sunday or a public holiday, it would be your hourly rate times 2. It's double pay effectively for that hour.
Okay. Now, does this work for is this for everybody that has a contract? Is it only for certain contracts or certain individuals? Who does it apply to and who doesn't it apply to?
Sure. So regulation of working hours is regulated by Chapter 2 generally of the BCA. That does not apply to senior managerial staff. It doesn't apply to people who earn above a threshold, what we call the earnings threshold set by the minister.
Okay.
And it wouldn't apply to those sorts of workers and contractors.
Hold up a minute. If you're earning above the threshold,
Yes,
then it doesn't apply to you.
that's correct.
What is the threshold?
So the Minister of Employment and Labour does change the threshold from time to time.
Okay.
Currently, it works out to about 240,101 Rand and 59 cents, or something to that effect. So that works out to about 20,100, just roughly.
A month.
A month.
Okay.
So anyone who earns above that threshold is not entitled to demand. They don't have a legal right to demand overtime pay. They can
Wow.
only try
That's
and negotiate for it.
Oh
Wow.
my goodness. That's hectic. Why?
They're considered senior employees in more senior positions, earning very decent salaries.
Yeah.
And sort of extra duties is sort of assumed with their role.
Yeah. So it's not compulsory then, like overtime. It's not compulsory if you are earning above the 20,000 threshold, right? Let's assume it's 20,000, right?
Okay.
If you are earning above the 20,000 threshold, then it's not compulsory for you then to get overtime, because you could be working 60, 70 hours a week. you still get your normal pay.
Sure. So in that case, someone who's earning above the threshold and working excess hours needs to try and renegotiate their
Yeah.
contract. But really, the main issue with the threshold and overtime pay is this aspect of how it can limit your rights. So, for example, let's say you have a dispute in the workplace relating to payment in terms of the BCA. Ordinarily, you would refer such a dispute to the CCMA. However, if you earn above the threshold, that does not apply to you, and you need to make your referral to the labor court.
Yeah.
And that's important because there are various time frames involved, and if you are out of time, your matter is dead in the water.
Sure.
Jenna, is there in a time like when you are in your training period or on probation still that you could discuss overtime or even get overtime if that happens?
Sure. So what I would advise for most people to do is actually to negotiate their contract before signing it, before they start. You need to know exactly what is in the contract and how does it apply to you. This could mean saying to the prospective employer, please can I have a copy of this contract to go and see a labor consultant or an attorney who specializes in labor law so that I can understand my rights. Or even speak to HR and say, I don't understand this contract. What does this mean and how does this apply to me? Because once you've signed that contract,
It's binding.
unless it's unlawful, yes.
Yeah, unless it's unlawful. Okay, and then also you've been making you've been referencing BCA quite a bit in what you've been explaining. For those who don't know what BCA stands for, do you mind just breaking that up for us quickly?
Sure. So it's the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. Here we go. I've got a copy for those who are watching. And anyone can access this on the internet. Okay, so you don't need an attorney to explain it to you. This is readily available. You just Google it, and the latest copy will appear. Anyone is entitled to receive a copy and read it.
Awesome, thank you.
That's awesome.
And then just in terms of contracts then, are there certain types of employment? Now, this is besides what you mentioned earlier, the financial threshold, right? Specifically the types of contracts that people sign that does not qualify for overtime.
Sure, so it's slightly different, but you do make a very valid point. For example, people who are on fixed-term contracts wanting to raise a dispute that they're actually permanent employees, or those that we call TES workers, those are temporary employment services, they're sort of outsourced workers. That's another way of phrasing it. If they want to allege they're actually the employee of the client of their company, then that sort of also can implicate whether or not they go to the CCMA or the labor court.
Sure.
And that also affects obviously then what they're entitled to in terms of compensation.
And what happens if you go to the CCMA because maybe your contract ended on your probational period and you know that you did overtime? Is it still given to you?
Sure. So actually a lot of people think that my contract can end at the end of probation, for example. That's not actually true. If you've signed a permanent contract of employment, you're permanent. And once you've signed that contract, it's not that, oh, I'm a probationary worker for the first 3 months and only thereafter am I permanent. That's not necessarily true. If you've signed that contract and it says on the top you're a permanent employee, you're permanent from the date you signed that.
But now, wait. But now what about, okay, maybe they've been operating illegally and this is the thing, like, when you don't know your rights, then you fall for whatever the company says,
So
unfortunately, right? So what about the instance where, like Michaela explained and like you've explained, you've signed a permanent contract to say, permanent contract. But then also you are told we're placing on a 3-month probation to see how you work. And it ends up, the stats weren't so lekker. The workload, it's not the way we want it within the 3 months. Thank you for your time. There's the door.
Yeah, so in a case like that, the employer must either use their discretion to extend the probationary period and provide training and extra resources and counseling to get the employee onto the standard that they require. Alternatively, they must investigate the disciplinary procedure and they'll have to go through a formal process to discipline and ultimately dismiss the employee.
If you're a freelancer, it does not apply to you.
That's correct.
If you're a contractor, it does not apply to you.
It depends what type of contractor. It always depends.
Yes, so.
It sounds like,
catchphrase.
Jenna, it sounds like Cliff has gotten scorned a few times.
Me-
Yeah.
It
Okay,
does sound that way.
Listen here, I've
Sounds
been,
like Cliff doesn't know his rights.
You know?
sounds like I've been doing lots of overtime and I wasn't paid for that overtime. Doing contracts for clients. Oh my goodness. Okay, Jenna, thank you so much. It's always
You're
like
most
to
welcome.
have you.
Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure. And of course, Jenna will be joining us the first Friday of every month to chat more around these things, to chat more about legal things, you know, whatever comes up, to chat more about contracts. You, the employer, you, the employee. And so if you have any questions, by all means, you can pop it to us when we have Jenna in studio. Like I said, we are on Facebook. This will be going on to podcast as well. Thank you, Jenna. It was lekker. And it's always been a pleasure to have you in studio.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Thank you so much. That was Jenna from Adams and Associates, and of course that conversation regarding are you entitled to overtime pay, and I was shooketh with all of this information that got shared this afternoon. Yo, bro.
At least you know your rights now, Cliff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but imagine all the money I lost out on now, eh?
Hey. But now, never again.
But now.